Nick Reyes. He can explain even the most complicated points concepts to anyone, I think, in the world. So he's from Frequent Miler. Thanks for joining us, Nick.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. I feel like you got to undersell, right? You got to under promise and over deliver. Don't promise me too high there with the most complicated. I can definitely explain some of the parts and pieces of miles and points to you. All right. Hopefully,
one that's been never on my radar, and you're the only person who's made the subject interesting because I don't have children, but you've as now a father of one and expecting two. You've covered a lot of different posts on areas of award tickets in particular that I just had no understanding of. That a miles ticket on one airline, they might charge a copay of miles for a lap infant. Others, they'll charge a % of the cash price of a ticket at full fare. So it can be all over the map. So how can you encapsulate, you've got a lap infant, how do you begin to look and understand, and what are some of the top airline picks for award tickets?
Yeah. Like you said, it really varies from one airline to another. And it's something I didn't think about before I had kids. But then, of course, when we had a son and he was under 2 years old, we were going to take him as a lap infant. And I recognize that there's some debate over whether or not that's a good idea and safe. And so I certainly won't make the decision for anybody else. But if you are going to travel with a lap infant, then yeah, some of the airline programs, you book an award ticket using your miles, and then they want to charge you 10% of the adult fare. And sometimes that's not even 10% of the best adult fare. It's 10% of like the full fare, which could be quite expensive, especially if you're using your miles to fly in business class or first class. It could be incredibly expensive. So, I mean, the first thing to do is really just start to Google it a little bit and figure out what airline you want to fly. And that's probably your first bet, is figure out what airline you'd like to fly on. And then, the magic of airline miles is that if I want to fly, let's say on ANA, a Japanese carrier, I can use miles from any Star Alliance airline. So then I have to figure out, okay, which airline's miles do I have access to, and which ones offer the best deal for a lap infant, because I can book that ANA flight using miles from ANA or from any one of their 27 or something partners. So I can use United Airlines miles to book the flight, or Air Canada's miles to book the flight. And so then it's a matter of figuring out which one has the best deal on infant lap tickets. So the best programs for infant lap tickets are pretty simple. There's just really a few. So Air Canada's Aeroplan, which is a transfer partner if you're an American citizen and you have American Express membership rewards points, you can transfer those points to Aeroplan. Or if you have a Capital One Venture card, you can do that. If you're from foreign programs, foreign countries, different types of credit card programs, I don't know the transfer partners for everyone, but Air Canada's Aeroplan is a great program if you're booking award tickets for lap infants, because they charge a flat fee of 10,000 miles or $100 round trip in business class, $12,500 or $125 in first class. Economy class, I want to say, is $75 or 7,500 miles. So they're flat fees, which is generally much less expensive than paying a percentage of the adult fare. So that's a really good one to look at. And recently, ANA came up on the map. Again, that'd be booking Star Alliance flights. And if you Google the Star Alliance, you'll see the 27 or 29 airlines or something in that alliance. And they charge 10% of the number of miles required for an adult ticket, which sometimes can just be a few thousand miles. So that's a great program too. Or if you want to fly on Virgin Atlantic's many partners, including Delta, they charge flat fees of like 2,500 miles, 1,000 miles in economy class, 5,000 in business, and 7,000 in first class, I think. So again, those are much cheaper compared to some programs. If you pay 10% of an adult fare, you might be talking about paying $500 or $1,000 or even $3,000 round trip on some of these first class fares that you can book with your miles for just a few dollars in tax, but then have to pay upwards of $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 for the privilege of holding an infant on your lap for 12 hours. That's not my idea of a good time. So doing a little bit of research. Oh, my mic. Hang on a second. I think my mic cable came out there for a second. Can you hear me now, Stefan?
You sound very different.
I sound very different. Okay, I think it switched over. I know how to fix that. So at any rate,
the people that are used to recording these kind of things are the most troublesome technologically because they have extra cables and all this stuff.
And this cable just got loose on me earlier. Can you hear me still? I just want to double check and make sure.
You're high pitched now. You're
I'm
not
high-pitched,
your
okay.
full
I'm
lusty radio voice.
Well, I'll see what we can do about that. That should hopefully be fixed now. So just be careful about not hitting that. It got loose earlier today. I don't know what happened with that. We'll get into it. But at any rate, so different programs offer some of the different advantages. And then another thing that a lot of people might not know, whether you're using miles, like I talk a lot about using miles, or if you're paying a cash fare, if you're traveling with an infant, you can send a message. I usually do it on Twitter to the airline's Twitter team. As long as you do it more than a day in advance and you let them know that you're traveling with a lap infant, most airlines will put together like a little meal of baby food for you, and usually a little packet of like some toys and a bib for the child and that kind of thing. And it was neat to see what some of the airlines did. Some of them had pretty elaborate packages of things for our son. So that was kind of fun too, and gave us some souvenirs that we've held on to from some of those trips.
And you said you won't judge on the baby decision, but I've shared in the links your post of why I travel with a baby, a heartfelt, memorable post. Make your case to tell people to stuff it.
Well, I think that because we write about using miles and points, a lot of what I changed my mic again, so I apologize for that. Hopefully you can still hear me, at least if it's not the best. And so, we write about using miles and points. And so a lot of our audience, our blog's audience, are people who are collecting miles and points to travel beyond their means, so to speak, to travel in these, luxurious business and first class cabins that they wouldn't ordinarily pay for. And many people have strong opinions that they feel like children don't belong in those spaces because they're meant for people who want to have a quiet, relaxing flight and that sort of thing. And I respect that some people have that perspective. On the flip side, I look at it as if the airline is willing to sell me a ticket, I have as much right to buy it as anybody else. And so I certainly don't feel apologetic about traveling with my son, though I'm quite careful to try to, of course, reduce disruptions for others. And then beyond that, the post that you shared kind of explains why I travel with my son. And to kind of give you the short of it, I guess it's in part because I can. And when I say that, I mean, when I look at where my parents began. My parents, when they had me, didn't have very much. My father grew up with quite a bit less, and gave me a very good life, where I don't remember those times when they didn't have very much, because by the time I was old enough to notice, we were pretty comfortably middle class, and I was really lucky for that. And and I think at some point I recognized that my father, particularly, and my mother had a strong desire to give us more than what they had, so to speak. And so now I find myself in position, because of the magic of these airline miles and hotel points that I've discovered easy ways to generate. I'm able to give my son these experiences that I didn't have growing up. We didn't do any international travel. My parents still don't have passports to this day. So that's not something that was part of my life growing up. But now I'm at a point in my life where I can do those things. And again, that's very much because of the credit card system in the United States and these miles and points that I found ways to leverage. And so I like to be able to give him those experiences and expose him to things that I know he won't remember the individual things, but I hope that he will become comfortable with the feeling of traveling and being in different situations, enjoying the chance to try something different. For lunch today, I made myself some noodles, a Thai noodle bowl of some sort. And he saw that and he said, "Oh, noodles, I want some of the noodles." And so he was eating the noodles. He, took half my bowl of noodles, as any parent knows how that goes. And we were talking about it. I said, "Do you like the noodles?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Do you remember we were in Japan last year?" I'm sure he didn't remember, but in Japan last year, he just ate soba noodles like they were going out of style. And so I'd like to expose him to those things, because then he tries those things that I didn't do, like I said, when I was his age. And, I think, as I said in the post, one of the things I have enjoyed is bringing him to places where there are lots of different people, going to a baseball game in Tokyo where, everybody else looked different than we did. And he can see that mom and dad aren't uncomfortable in a situation like that. And hopefully over time, he grows the same level of comfort that we have with, experiencing different cultures and different people, and enjoying the fact that there's so much out there in the world. And hopefully that also exposes him to enough things to make him curious, and see all the different jobs out there and all the different interests a person can have. Again, things that I didn't really consider growing up in a small town in the middle of nowhere, that I've been exposed to over time. And I look forward to exposing him to those things, and our next son to come here in September.
It sounds a great prescription for anyone of any age to have you introducing them to travel. Of course, your son can walk into a certain hotel and act like he owns it. So everybody does want to know Not everybody in EBS will know the backstory of how you came to name your son after a hotel brand, and what's in store for which brand is going to be number 2 has been the question.
Right. That has been the question. Yeah. So, yes, it is correct. My son is named after a hotel brand, not for the reason that most would assume when they hear that, but my wife and I had traveled quite a bit in the few years before we had our son. So my wife and I traveled before we found this whole airline mile thing for many years on a shoestring budget. I mean, we were $3 a night hostel kind of people, traveling as much as we could. We'd work really hard, 60, 70, 80 hours a week for a few months, and then take off for a month or two and go somewhere. So we did that style of travel for a long time. And then we decided we were finally ready to settle down and get married after being together for about 8 years already. And so we said, okay, well, when we get married, we want to have a really epic honeymoon and take a big trip, but we didn't have a lot of money. And so I did some research and I started to learn about using airline miles and hotel points. And so we took a 4-month honeymoon and traveled all around the world. It was fantastic. And because we were using points to stay in these places we never would have paid for, we were able to stay at some nicer brands than normal. And Conrad is the highest of the Hilton brands, the various Hilton brands. Conrad and Waldorf Astoria are kind of the highest in that particular chain's brand. And one of the things that the Conrad hotels do is kind of almost a brand standard, not quite everyone, but most of them give you stuffed animals. Like, in London, you get a bulldog. In Dubai, you get a camel. In different places, you get something that's kind of representative of the area anyway. And so we had a bunch of these stuffed animals that said Conrad on them. And so we had a whole bunch of them. And my wife was pregnant. We were talking about names and we couldn't agree on names at all. She would suggest things and I would suggest things and forget about it. And we were saying, we're never going to have a name for this kid. And I started joking at some point, we should just name him Conrad because he'll have a personalized set of stuffed animals right off the bat. We won't need to buy any more stuffed animals. And they'll get his name on them already. So how cool is that? And so it was a joke for a long time about Conrad this and Conrad that. And then, the joke stuck. So, so before you knew it, we had a son named Conrad. So now, we've stayed at Conrad Hotel with him, and he got incredible treatment at the Conrad Bora Bora last year with everybody knowing his name when we got there. So that was a lot of fun. And they did some really special things with doing up the room with his name, and the housekeeping staff had put together, they sewed a pillow for him with a stingray on it, and of course his name. And so for some neat stuff like that I never would have even thought of, but it's been a lot of fun. And for the second one, I don't know. My boss at Frequent Miler, Greg, has been saying that I should name him Regis Reyes after the St. Regis brand of hotels, but that one hasn't stuck yet. So it's still up in the air. We haven't agreed on a name yet for number 2. So Baby Reyes number 2 is coming in a couple of months. So I got to make up my mind, or I say I have my mind. We have to make up our minds. Let me be clear. We have to agree on that, which was, the challenge the first time around. So we'll see. I got a couple of months to go.
There's quite a few brands that I think would be an immediate veto.
Yeah, well, I think that in the beginning, Greg said to me that, thank goodness it's not the Waldorf that gave out stuffed animals. That would have been
it could be a fun global search just to find people with every hotel brand's name and get a collection of travelers. You mentioned French Polynesia, and you not only visited one spectacular hotel, but more than one, and that's a trip. I've not been to French Polynesia. I'm going to go to Pitcairn, which is my particular interest, or it's going to be the kind of trip you took with my wife, and really spectacular. And it's a destination many travelers have in their mind, and I think it's daunting, confusing. There's a lot of surprise costs, I would say, if you just think you're booking your hotel and landing at the airport. So how can you teach people to have whether it's points or cash, the French Polynesia experience, that they come away happy? Because I think that surprise cost can really ruin the mood of a trip if people are not getting what they're expecting.
Yeah, there obviously has to be research on the front end because, like you said, there are certainly some costs involved with going to French Polynesia, particularly if you want to get to the various islands like Bora Bora, where we stayed. We spent 8 nights in Bora Bora at 2 different hotels. The St. Regis Bora Bora, which is famous for being the hotel where Couples Retreat was filmed, and then Conrad Bora Bora, which is much newer, has a very different view and very different feel. But French Polynesia is one of those things, Bora Bora in particular, that I felt like lived up to the hype. type. Now, some people refer to it as boring because all there is to do is relax at your hotel, essentially, and your hotel is kind of isolated from everyone else. But to me, the beauty of it, just the stunning natural beauty, was worth seeing. There are places where I go to experience the local culture, and there are places I go to experience nature, and there are places I go to experience the cosmopolitan nature of the place. So, I mean, this was a place that, to me, I wanted to kick back and relax and just have a week of sunshine, and that's exactly what I got, and gorgeous views. But like you said, you have to be prepared ahead of time. So for us, that meant figuring out which airline miles and points would be best. And so my first step in figuring that out is always just to Google the airport that I'm trying to arrive at, and then take a look at the Wikipedia page for that airport and see which airlines fly there. And then once I know which airlines fly there, then I'll type into Google, okay, the best way to fly to French Polynesia, or best way to fly to French Polynesia on Air France on Miles or something like that. Now, these days I've created resources like that at Frequent Miler. So that's the blog that I write for. So at Frequent Miler, you can search in the chat box, best way to get to, and do a search. And we've got posts for various regions around the world in terms of the best ways to get there on miles. So that was the first step, figuring out, okay, which miles can get me there and which miles can get me back. And so we wanted to stop in Hawaii on the way, and so we used miles to fly on Hawaiian Airlines, Virgin Atlantic miles to fly on Hawaiian Airlines from Hawaii to Tahiti, and then back on Air France. I used Air France and KLM flying Blue Miles to get back from there, and I used hotel points to pay for the hotels. But you also have to get from Tahiti, when you get there, from Papeete to, for instance, Bora Bora, and that is something you can't traditionally book on airline miles, that you have to pay for that, and that round trip flight is $400 or $500 for a 30-minute each way kind of a flight, maybe a 45-minute flight. But if you have points in the United States anyway, that's the place I'm most familiar with a program like Chase Ultimate Rewards. You can use those points if you've got, for example, the Sapphire Reserve card at 1.5 cents each. And so you could use about 30,000 Chase points to book that flight, not have to pay for it out of pocket. And so that's like about half of the number of points that come with a typical credit card sign-up bonus. So one credit card sign-up bonus could get 2 people that round trip flight and not have to pay for it. So that's certainly something. And, if somebody out there is looking to go to French Polynesia, what I would tell you is, even better than what I did, is to take a look at the Air Tahiti website, because there are island hopper tickets that can get you to multiple islands in French Polynesia for just a very little bit more than what I paid just to fly from Papeete to Bora Bora. So if it was I think it was $440 when I booked it for my round trip, and if I had paid like $480 or $490, we could have visited 4 or 5 islands. So I would have definitely done that in hindsight for a trip like that. But so again, you have to take a look at which costs there are going to be, because there are some very pricey costs in terms of that, in terms of transfers from the airport to your hotels, which is again something that I did a little bit of research in, because I wanted to stay at 2 different properties. So I booked an independent transfer between properties, because those types of things do get quite pricey in a location like that. That's not the type of place I typically go on vacation. That's like one of those once in a lifetime sort of trips. Although we went, and of course, as we were there, my wife said, "So how long before we can justify coming back?" It was a great time. But the nice thing though is when you stay at chain properties, I like boutique individual places where you can experience local culture as much as anybody. But when you're family traveling, as we are, one of the advantages is with Marriott properties in Asia Pacific, children under 7, maybe it's under 12, eat for free. So my son was able to order complete meals and not have to pay for them at the restaurants, at the beach. We were just sitting on the beach one day, and a waiter came up and said, "Do you need some food for him? Remember, it's complimentary, blah, blah, blah." And so that's kind of nice. You use points to book the hotel, don't pay for that. Find a way to game the hotel elite system so you can get elite access and not pay for breakfast. And then, if you're traveling with kids and you're able to get them fed for free also, then that certainly helps to create a big dent in the cost of going to a place like that.
Now, when I hear 8 nights, it makes me think you either blew away 2 5th night frees, or more likely you had a Marriott 5th night free and then 3 Hilton weekend certs.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah, actually, you know what? It was two Hilton weekend certs and points for the 3rd night, but same difference. And Yeah, and a fifth night free, because with many of the award programs, if you're booking an award stay, then the fifth night is free. And the St. Regis Bora Bora was a particular sweet spot for a short period of time. When we see opportunities, because that's my job, is writing about deals at frequent miler. So when I see opportunities for great deals, I write about them, and often I get very tempted to book them because they're great deals. So it was a particular window of time where that property was bookable for many fewer points. For years, it would have cost hundreds of thousands of points per night to stay there, and all of a sudden it was going to cost about 48,000 points per night, which was a big difference. It might sound like a large number, but it was much more affordable than it had been for years for a very short window of time. So I was able to take advantage of that and pay not that many points per night, and at least not that many for my situation. I happen to have had a lot of points from some other things I had done, so both from new credit card signups over the years, and then just other opportunities within the loyalty program, because I spend a lot of time studying loyalty programs, and that's not necessarily everybody's bag, but for me, it's worth the time investment, because we love to travel. And like I said, we were the $3 a night hostel types for many years. And, these days we stay in places that are much nicer like that, where I used points and paying cash. We ran into a couple that was there on a cash stay for, I think, 10 or 15 nights. And doing the math, I was thinking they must have spent $15,000 at least on that. And,
Oh, wow.
For us to just use some points and then, those round trip flights that were kind of expensive, we used points for those too. Like I said, 30,000 Chase points covered those. So being able to walk out of there, and we didn't even end up paying for our food. The way we figured out how to redeem points for Marriott gift cards so that we were able to pay for our food with gift cards. So really, I don't think we used any out-of-pocket cash on that trip at all, which was...
Using the gift cards, did you end up losing a lot on exchange, or how did that... Because a lot of them are denominated, say, in US dollars, and then the hotel does something that, like the magic TravelX button of taking away 15% of the value.
To be honest with you, I don't recall whether we had lost out on the exchange on that, and I should know that. That's a good
don't look
question.
it up.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't. Marriott gift cards, Marriott hotels always have so much trouble figuring out how to use the gift cards. So I was like, that it's always a struggle. So I knew I was prepared. I went early on the morning of checkout. We needed to leave at noon or 1 o'clock. So I went down there at 7 a.m. and I said, listen.
Yes, I learned that. Yes, while my wife was having breakfast is the time when they get out the dusty binder where they get the instructions, and it's always like press F3 followed by F7.
Right. And they were like, I don't know if we can use this. And I was like, I think you probably can. And they said, okay, well, it'll take us a little while. And so they had to take them in the back and get back to me later. And I knew that was going to happen. So that's what happened, but they were able to use it. And I don't know exactly what the exchange was, but I remember thinking that what I had was right about the amount that I needed to cover. We had been kind of...
it might work, because in a lot of those resorts, they're denominating in US dollars and how they're doing things. So it might, straight up, yeah.
Again, I'd have to look it up because I can't recall the exact details. But I remember we were budgeting throughout the week.
Don't touch it. Let's distract you away from looking it up. So, you're also a yachty, and we'll stay in the Pacific. So how did you come to be a member of the Niue Yacht Club? And that's Niue is a destination familiar and interested by many PS members.
Yeah, so Niue really just fell onto my radar. So at the blog at Frequent Miler last year, we did a challenge where each of the main authors of the blog took 40,000 points from a U.S. credit card program and $400 and attempted to see who could get the farthest away, which is a difficult thing to judge, we realized, because how do you measure what the farthest away is? Is it the physically farthest point from the starting point, the person who flew the most miles, et cetera, et cetera? So essentially, I ended up going a little bit over budget. I ended up spending a little over $600, but I was able to get to a number of places. So for that 40,000 points and about $600 over the course of a week, I traveled starting in Washington, D.C., traveled to Honolulu for a day, and then to Tokyo, and then flew to Brisbane, Australia via Bangkok. And then from Brisbane, I flew on a multi-segment trip that gave me a few 8-hour layovers. So I got to spend a day in an overnight in Christchurch, New Zealand, a day in Nelson, New Zealand, a night in Auckland, New Zealand, and then end up in Niue. So I used airline miles for that to fly on Air New Zealand. I used Avianca Life miles to fly on Air New Zealand because they are partners in that Star Alliance that I mentioned earlier. And so that was the last leg of my journey. And I had a little bit of trouble booking that, but I discovered that by emailing the Life Miles customer service, I was able to get them to manually put together exactly the booking I wanted to get to Niue. There, for a long time, I get the impression there was not very much award space on Air New Zealand to get to Niue, because you can only fly there from Auckland if you're not familiar with Niue. Niue has 2 flights a week from Auckland on Air New Zealand. That's it. 2 in, 2 out. Fascinating place to go. The airport has no computers. Everything is done by hand, boarding pass written by hand. And the person who is like the equivalent of a TSA agent at the airport was playing the guitar at my hotel the night before. So, because of course, TSA, so to speak, is only a 2-day-a-week job if you're in Niue, since the airport's only open a couple of days a week. So I ended up with Niue because I was just looking at different Pacific islands because I was trying to get to an isolated place, and I had never heard of Niue. I saw it on an award chart. So when I'm looking to figure out where I can go, I'll often Google an award chart, like the Avianca Life Miles award chart, and I'll look at the region definitions and see what countries are listed in the region definition. And whenever I see one someplace that I'm not familiar with, that I don't know about, I get particularly intrigued. Like, I hadn't heard of Niue before that. I wasn't familiar with it. So I said, oh, wow, this is interesting. I've never heard of that. Googled it, took a look at some pictures. And it's interesting, like I said, because it is quite isolated, population of about 1,600 people. And from what I hear locally, it seems like that number might be a little inflated. That might not be some people who, own property and may spend more of their time in New Zealand. So it didn't even seem like there were that many people on this small island. No rivers, no running water sources like that. So there's no pollution in the water, in the ocean, so to speak. No runoff. That's the word I was looking for. No runoff in the ocean. So some of the clearest blue water I have ever seen in my life surrounding Niue. So really interesting place to go snorkeling. I'm sure to go scuba diving for people who go scuba diving. Although I will say I went snorkeling and I was amazed because I could see the scuba divers the entire time. And I could see what they were looking at the whole time because the water was just that clear. You could see down quite a distance. So that was pretty amazing. And my family was able to join me. So I flew my family ahead of me to Auckland. So we were able to fly together from Auckland to Niue. And Niue, of course, once you get there, since there's only 2 flights a week, you're there for 4 days when you get there. You either get there on or 2 days, perhaps, if you get there Tuesday, because I think it's Tuesdays and Thursdays maybe that the flights are in and out. I can't recall. I think you cross the date line. So you on Monday and arrive on Sunday or something like that, depending on which direction you're going in. So you're there mostly 4 days, I think, depending on which flights you take. So you're there for 4 days, and it's a neat place to check out because, again, it's pretty isolated. You have to get a local driver's license and rent a car, and then the Niue Yacht Club is where you started with this. And I apologize, I got off on a tangent. But the Niue Yacht Club, if you join it in Niue, costs the equivalent of about $12 US. I think it's 25 New Zealand dollars or something like that is what it was. So about the equivalent of $12 US to join the Niue Yacht Club. Now, I've never been on a yacht in my life, but but I said to myself, for $12, I could be a member of a yacht club. And I'm not a yacht guy. I'm not a boat guy. I don't have any friends or many friends that belong to a yacht club. So that seemed like kind of a neat thing to do. So I strolled down to the Niue Yacht Club and grabbed a membership, bought a shirt, and the gentleman there told me, hey, maybe you can get into the New York Yacht Club with this. I think he was pulling my leg because it says NYC on it, Niue Yacht Club. But I gave it a shot anyway. I did. I went to Manhattan. I went to the New York Yacht Club and I said, hey, can I get in with this? They let me in to see the model room. They do have a reciprocal membership in Auckland, though, with the yacht club there. And there's one other one. So you can get into a couple of other yacht clubs with your $12 Niue Yacht Club membership. So if you make it there, you can get into at least a couple of them. So now I'm a card carrying member. You can also join, by the way, on the internet. I think it's more. It's like $40 or $50 or something if you join.
Defeat the purpose, but I love the reciprocal benefits. I did a similar thing with visiting U.S. presidential museums, which one annual pass gets you into all of them, but they all charge whatever price they set. So it depends who you're willing politically to support, and as well as your budget, and it's quite a range from, I think, $25 to 80 something. So it
That's
is
a great hack. That's a great. I had a friend who did a similar thing with a museum membership somewhere. He lives in Chicago, but found some other less expensive museum, I suppose, that he was able to buy a membership at and visit the Museum of Art there in Chicago frequently. So yeah, that could be a great hack if you want to spend some time in the yacht club there in Auckland. Then you can fly off to Niue for 4 days and join the yacht club there for $12, and a very casual place. They have a club. Like it's sort of a room, but that's relatively new, I think. Before that, they didn't have a space for a while, but they do now. And the gentleman there was quite nice and accommodating when I bought my shirt and my membership, and so that was fun. My idea originally was to wind up there with just $12 left in my pocket and buy the membership. But like I said, I ended up going a little bit over budget because a couple of mistakes along the way. But it was a lot of fun, though. Really neat. And I like ending up in places like that and learning something new about the history of a place that I've never even thought about before. So that's one of the things I enjoy about traveling, is discovering those places that I'm sure many other people know, very much about. But, of course, I'm constantly learning about new places and things.
And that's a complicated one to book because you're crossing the international date line. So be careful of your Auckland and Niue flight departure times and your connections exactly when you're coming and going. But it's one that I had followed for years. I mean, truly, it was never a single award seat. And I got different explanations. It was related to the government, New Zealand government subsidizing the route and different things. And then it was only maybe 6 or 9 months before your trip that suddenly just every flight on the route became available for awards, except I think you mentioned Life Miles. Like a lot of airlines hadn't even programmed the Niue airport into their search engine, so you had to manually call her. And I still haven't been. I booked it just because I was so happy that it was available, but then I ended up having to cancel
yeah, well, and I had heard that you may not be able to book a one-way flight to Niue because unless you obviously have a residency permit there. So I had heard that might be an issue, but it wasn't. I booked a one-way flight there and a one-way flight out. That's typically how I travel on separate one-way tickets. Because I just generally find it easier to plan.
I don't think when it first started becoming available, it was only connecting itineraries from outside that you couldn't start in Australia and New Zealand. It was very hard to ticket, but then I think that got solved as well. So you could start in Fiji or something, but you just couldn't start in Australia and New Zealand. And the cash prices have gone down too a bit, so it's not insurmountable as a destination now. Joseph Petrovic is asking, what place in the world have you been that blew you away so much that you can't wait to return once you're in the air again?
Oh, that's a loaded question. So I think there's an answer that came to mind right away when you said that. And, often people ask, my wife and I, our friends and family will ask about favorite places, and it's often tough to pick. When we were on our honeymoon, we had been to, I think, 16 or 18 different countries over the course of the few months we were traveling, and we were on the plane to the final destination. And my wife looked at me and said, so people are going to ask us when we get home, what was our favorite place? And I said, yeah, I don't know. I mean, so far I've liked every place we've been. And she felt the same way. Nothing had stuck out at us as better in that type of a way that you're describing. And then we landed in our final destination, South Africa. And to this day, I think that traveling on a safari and seeing the animals in Kruger National Park is one of the most amazing feelings. And I think that some people will tell you that there are too many tourists in a place like Kruger, and so you're sharing the park with too many people, but we didn't feel that way at all. We felt like we spent hours and hours driving around by ourselves in Kruger. We booked rest camps within Kruger Park. Lower Sabi was our favorite by far in terms of wildlife viewing and also just the atmosphere of the Lower Sabi rest camp. If you're interested in that kind of a trip, pretty inexpensive, about $100 a night or so to book a private cabin within the rest camps inside the national park. So that was pretty incredible. I mean, we also have driven across South Africa now and been able to see a number of different places. And I'd love to go back and check out Swaziland. We drove through, but didn't get a chance to stop. So there are a number of other places in Africa that intrigue me. But to me, there's nothing that really matches that magic of driving around a corner and all of a sudden there's a rhino crossing the road. Or we spent days and days looking for leopards the first trip. And I say the first trip because that was on our honeymoon. We went and spent 5 or 6 days in the park, and we didn't see leopards at all. And we were kind of disappointed in the end. We saw cheetahs on our last day, literally driving back to the rest camp to call it a day and quit on it. And we were very excited, but we didn't see any leopards. And we left, and we loved it so much that we booked another trip about 15 or 16 months later. to go back again and do it again. And I still remember we were driving back to camp, and all of a sudden my wife and I must have seen a leopard at the same time standing right next to the road. And she said, "Oh my goodness, stop." And I hit the brake. And it's just amazing to watch these animals walking around, wandering around, and get a chance to witness that. That was something really neat to me. So that's a place that I am very, very excited to go back to, and also to check out some other places where we can see wildlife within Africa. Our son is 2.5 years old now, and he knows, you can quiz him on animals and where they're from, and he knows so many from Africa and Australia and different oceans and whatnot. He's pretty well versed on his animals, so I think he's going to really enjoy it. But I think we probably want to wait until both of our sons are old enough to really appreciate it and go back. So I don't necessarily know that it's that place that I'm ready to go to as soon as the airports open again, but it's a place that I'm definitely eager to get back to eventually. But really, I have enjoyed almost everywhere we've ever been. So it's hard to pick a place, that stands out above the others. Prague is probably the other city that I miss the most, that I haven't been to in a long time. Just the beauty of Prague stands out at me. Walking around, feeling like every corner is really beautiful. But I think that the way we travel has changed a lot too, because when we first started traveling, we traveled to places as though we would never get a chance to get there again. And now that we have figured out how to play the airline miles game, so to speak, we don't feel that same pressure anymore. It always feels like places are within reach to go back to when we want to. So I feel less of an urgency to get back to places, almost because it's easier to get back to them now than it once was for us. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to say that there's a lot of the world that I'm interested in getting to again. I feel like there are more places that I would love to go back to than places that I feel like I'm satisfied with. But I guess Gary Leff has some quote he's repeated a few times. Gary Leff writes the blog View from the Wing. He says something along the lines of, you always want to leave wanting a little bit more than what you got, so to speak. So that you don't leave feeling like you saw it all and you're done with it, but leave feeling like there was a little bit more you wanted for next time. And I think he's right. I think I enjoy that feeling of looking forward to a future trip.
He does vacation to like a sum total of 3 places in the world and goes to them over and over again. So maybe there's a limit to places that he feels like he wants more.
Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, he goes to Maldives over and over, but he hates seeing people's bare feet. So I don't know how that works.
And I feel like that's one of those places at the Maldives. We went there and only went to one hotel for 2 or 3 nights, and so I didn't see very much. And I haven't felt the same call to go back again and again. I know people that go back again and again. I'll be intrigued someday to get back there though, and see if I check out a different area of it and feel more of that call. So that's also another one of the things I love about traveling, that the same place can have 2 totally different feels depending on when you go.
You have a background in remote education and explaining a complicated subject. So frequent milers earn miles without flying, and they can almost broaden it. It doesn't have to be in the US. So somebody who is very skeptical, what is this concept and why does it work?
Yeah, well, so the tagline "Earn Miles Without Flying" is because we spend a lot of time looking for opportunities to earn airline miles without travel. Believe it or not, typically the best ways to earn miles, and I use the word miles to broadly mean loyalty points awarded by various airlines and hotel programs. The best ways to earn the most miles have nothing to do with flying in general, not travel. And paid travel is great if you have a company you work for and they're paying for your travel and you're able to collect the miles and points from that travel. Great. That's excellent for you, but that's not going to be the fastest way to accumulate lots of miles for most people. Except the most traveled among us, I suppose. For most of us, like I said, from the United States perspective, it's often welcome bonuses from credit cards. But even in other countries, there are often shopping portals. Many airlines have shopping portals where you can click through their website to go to your favorite retailer, whether that's a department store or sporting goods store or whatever. When you're going to buy the things online that you're going to buy yourself anyway in day-to-day life, you can sometimes earn large mileage bonuses and get an infusion of miles on a single purchase, not even from your credit card. I'm just saying from clicking their link to go to your favorite store, whatever store that might be, they get a piece of whatever commission based on what you bought for the same price you were going to pay anyway. And they share some of that with you in the form of miles. And that's really how I got into the airline miles thing in the first place. I was sometimes buying things on sale online and reselling them for a very small profit, figuring that if I could make even 5%, I was doing better than I was in my savings account. So I could make a little bit of money and then suddenly earn some free miles while I was doing it. And that's how I really discovered the airline miles kind of idea, was because I had the opportunity to click through these portals and buy things that I was buying anyway and also earn some airline miles. And so there are opportunities like that exist in different countries. And then when you earn those airline miles, like I said, I think the thing that unlocks the most magic is the fact that you can use those miles to fly often on many different airlines. So each of the major airlines in the world belongs to alliances. They have partnerships with many other programs. So, for example, if you collect British Airways Avios, you can use those British Airways Avios to fly on lots of different airlines. In fact, probably the worst use is using them to fly on British Airways. You probably would rather use those miles to fly on one of British Airways' partners, whether that's Qantas or American Airlines or Cathay Pacific. It depends on what region of the world you're in, where you want to fly. But there are often opportunities to pick up miles for silly things. Sometimes you can subscribe to a magazine online and pick up a few thousand miles just for subscribing to the magazine, and then put those miles to use on one of those short, expensive flights that you want to take somewhere. You talked about Niue used to be quite an expensive flight, and there are oftentimes very short flights. Some of the world's shortest flights can be really expensive when you're using cash, but might be really inexpensive on points. You might be able to buy yourself a subscription to a magazine that comes with 3,000 or 4,000 airline miles, and then put those to use to book that flight that would otherwise be quite expensive. So we look for those sorts of opportunities of generating a lot of points, and ideally, it would be a wonderful world if I could just send money to myself using my credit card and then deposit it in the bank and pay off the credit card bill. I mean, wouldn't that be wonderful if I could charge myself thousands of dollars at a time and just put that money right back in the bank to pay off the bill and print points. Yeah. And so that concept is kind of not easily possible, but we look for opportunities like that where you might be able to use a credit card and earn some miles and somehow get most of that money back and pay off the bill in order to reduce the cost of your travel. And so, we've been doing that for years. That's how we travel as much as we do. Last year, I think we spent time in about a dozen different countries, and I spent maybe 3 or 4 months worth of travel, I would say, last year. And of course, I work for a blog that writes about travel, but I'm not required to travel for the job per se. So that travel was very much for just pleasure and enjoyment. And yes, I was able to write about it for work in many instances, but it wasn't traveling because I needed to for work. It was because I could, because I learned how to put together these miles. So it does seem a little, too good to be true in some ways. And I think that when I first got into this, I thought the same. Like, how is it possible to be able to do that? But the fact of the matter is that there are lots of different companies out there looking to reward you in some way, to encourage you to fly with their airlines. And if you become a little bit smarter than the system, then you can use that and leverage it to be able to get quite a bit of travel.
Fantastic. And you mentioned reselling. What is reselling? And my follow-up will be, I've always been intimidated by even selling something I own on eBay, just the process, the hassle. Is it still worth it, and how?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed quite a bit. So, I mean, years ago, I used to spend a lot of time on deal sites. In the US, Slick Deals and Dan's Deals, there's a bunch of different deal sites where people all day long find good deals on various sites. It could be anything, Amazon, Macy's, et cetera, et cetera. And they'll post these great deals. And so it kind of started with me. I saw a great deal on a tablet that I really wanted to buy. And I said, I really want that, but my wife is going to think that that's a waste of money. She's going to think I shouldn't spend money on that. And she's right. I probably shouldn't waste the money on that. But I was like, man, that's such a good deal, though. I wonder if I buy 3 of them, if I can sell 2 of them and make enough money, enough profit selling 2 of them to keep one, to justify keeping one. And sure enough, I did just that. And then she said, well, honey, maybe you should buy 10 more of those. So I started looking for deals, for chances where, okay, something is on sale cheap enough and it sells for much more on Amazon or eBay than it does at this particular store I can get it at right now. Or sometimes it's a matter of using benefits of the credit cards I have. Amex has lots of Amex offers in the US where you can might get, maybe $20 back when you spend 100, or sometimes it's
Mm,
$100 back when you spend 500. And so if you're able to take advantage of those sorts of shopping offers and coupon deals, then you can sometimes
mm,
resell those products again on eBay, on Amazon. And there is some hassle involved. I mean, for a long time, I was buying things like coffee makers and little small kitchen appliances, and I would list them all for sale. And then I would spend a few hours every afternoon printing out shipping labels and shipping them out myself. And then over time,
mhm,
I started shipping those into Amazon for them to send for me. And so now I've gotten to the point where I'll really only look at buying large items where there's maybe more of a room for profit, I suppose. But I started out, like I said, looking at just small profits. If you have to figure out what the fees are going to be to sell things, and then just look and see, well, do I think I can make enough? And what I was doing at the time is I was buying things, let's say from a department store that has a 30-day or 90-day return policy. So I would buy it from the department store, list it for sale on Amazon or eBay. And if it didn't sell in 25 days, I could return it to where I bought it from in the first place. And if it did
oh,
sell, then, great. Then I was able to collect a little bit of money. There's risk involved, and people can return things get broken in shipping. There are a lot of different things to consider. I always tell people, if you're interested in getting involved in that kind of an activity, start slow. It's just like, if you were to walk into a casino, don't gamble with more than you can afford to lose. And it's the same kind of thing with reselling products, but it can actually be quite easy. I try to avoid products that are likely to attract a lot of scammers. Electronics, I
okay.
mentioned the tablets in the beginning. Those are
Mm,
likely to attract scammers. iPhones and watches, Apple watches and things like that. You're more likely to run into a problem selling those types of items. So I started doing things like kitchen appliances, larger home appliances and things
mhm,
where people know what they want. They buy it. They are very rarely return it. Things don't get broken in shipping very often. And so I'll look for things like that where there's just enough room to make a little bit of profit. And then again, earn those miles on my credit card,
mhm,
because I
mhm,
paid using a credit card that earned miles for me. And I clicked through a shopping portal that earned more miles. Extreme stacking is something that we've written about at Frequent Miler in the past, where you can sometimes stack discounts and opportunities to earn miles from several different places. When you're making a single purchase, you might be able to earn miles in several different ways on a single purchase. And then
mm,
again, if you're able to resell and make, $5 or $10 plus, earn a decent number of miles that can be worth the time, especially if you're able to scale it up. And that's really what helped me take my honeymoon, and what helped me earn a lot of the miles that I have now was taking advantage of those kinds of opportunities.
fantastic. And trying to, yeah, there's such a flood. I mean, I feel like, I mean, I've been in this points area for almost a decade now, and I still find it difficult to stop myself. And my goal is travel. Other people's have very different goals of even cash rebates as true business in the reselling. But just taking your site alone, which there's many sites, Frequent
Mm-hmm.
Milers, and
Sure.
incredible, I recommend. But there's any given day, there's what, 7, 8 deals or updates or posts. And I feel like you could, if you did every deal on your site, you could bankrupt yourself by saving money and getting all of these deals,
It's
and
true.
forget about feeding the pets and all of that, because it's
It's
addictive.
true.
So,
It
so,
is.
so
It
how
can.
do you
Yes. Yeah. So how do you kind of decide?
how do you choose? How do you restrain yourself as well?
Yeah, I've gotten better at restraining myself over time. I think that there was a time where I definitely, dove in head first and jumped at every deal that I could find. I think that over time, I came to realize that many deals repeat. There are rarely once in a lifetime type deals. Often deals will come around again. And I came to learn, even on those once in a lifetime deals, there's a new once in a lifetime deal that comes around every year, every few months, every day in some regards. So I learned to just go after the things that particularly interest me. In the beginning, I was often intrigued by every possibility under the sun. But over time, I came to learn that when you stick with what you know well, you tend to both enjoy it and do better at it, whatever that is in life. So it became the same thing with reselling and with deals. And I've also, I think, um, gained a little more restraint in the sense that, again, I know how to look for the deals. And, there's the old saying, teach a a person to fish, or you give a person to fish, they eat for a day, teach them to fish, they eat for a lifetime. And I think that, when you look at a blog, whatever blog that might be, ours or some other blog, in terms of deals and things, I think the more important thing over time is to learn how to look for deals, because then you can find the things that interest you the most and kind of filter out what doesn't matter to you. And when you learn how to look at a deal and see, okay, well, if that works, then maybe this will work too. And then you can start to apply the concepts. And it really depends on your goals. I often tell people, if you're interested in getting into airline miles and hotel points and the kind of games we play with those things, I think the best thing to do is to start with a trip and say, okay, you know what? I really want to go here, and I really don't want to pay for it. So how can I make that happen with airline miles? Which miles, which hotel points do I need in order to do that particular trip? And then that can help you, I think, focus down to, okay, what things are relevant to that specific goal? And then once you have achieved that goal and taken that trip and done that thing, then I think you'll be able to more easily focus yourself for the future ones. So I think that it helps to have a specific goal in mind. And I say that as somebody who doesn't often have a specific goal in mind these days, because my focus is quite a bit all over the map, but that's because it's what I'm doing for a living, writing about those things. So my job in some sense is to stay in touch with Stefan's interests and my interests, and person A, B, C, D, E, so that hopefully we write something that matches for each person. Not every post and every deal is going to be important for every person, but hopefully we write about enough different things that it intrigues a lot of different people. So keep that in mind with any blog you visit, that, they're obviously writing for a lot of people, and what's relevant for me might not be relevant for you. If you're not traveling with an infant, then you won't necessarily particularly care about the great deal that I found to fly with an infant in business class. Or if you really just want to fly as many places as possible, you're more interested in economy class, so you can get as many different destinations as possible using your miles and points. So I think that it helps to have a goal.
And people want to find the deal before it gets public, of course. And so walk through one of your incredible finds, a so-called award sweet spot, where an award program has an outsized value, and that's the Turkish Airlines program redemption on United Airlines for flights that have nothing to do with Turkey.
That's right. Well, I was reading a post about investing the other day, just something that has been catching my interest lately. And somebody mentioned that they had a grandfather, a family member who had given them investing advice early on, and said, when everybody's running in one direction, you probably ought to think about going in the other direction. And I think that that's the case. When you ask, how do you find those deals, is to look in the places nobody else is looking. And that's the same thing. That concept has served me well in reselling products. I've often said I want to be sourcing products that nobody else is looking at, and selling products that nobody else is selling. So, when you can look for something that is different and unique than what other people have, then you have a better chance of success, I think. And so that Turkish sweet spot that you're talking about was a discovery I made, because we were doing that challenge that I mentioned before, to travel as far as we could with a limited number of points and a limited amount of money. And so I started looking into the various different airline programs that I could transfer my transferable points to. And Turkish Airlines was one of the options for Citi Thank You points. That was the currency I had to work with Citi Thank You points. And so I started looking at their award chart. I simply Googled Turkish Airlines award chart and started looking at the different regions. And a lot of times, those things are kind of boring, but if you read the details and the terms and conditions, and that's the kind of the people we are, so to speak, is those people that read those little terms and conditions. Eventually, at some point in there, I found that it said that domestic flights domestic flights on any Star Alliance carrier were just 7,500 miles each way in economy class. And so, I thought, okay, that sounds great. So I can get across the country. I could fly from Washington to Los Angeles for 7,500 points. That seems like a terrific deal. Most airline programs charge at least 12,500 points. So that's about 50% more, and many would charge even more. So I thought, oh, that's great. And then I started to look at the region definitions, and I realized, oh, Hawaii is included in the United States, because that's a domestic destination, isn't it? Whereas most airline programs consider Hawaii a separate region, I've realized that Turkish Airlines doesn't. Now, I mentioned before Star Alliance and different alliances. So Turkish Airlines is a Star Alliance airline, and United is a Star Alliance airline. So that means that a domestic flight on United would cost just 7,500 miles anywhere within the United States, whether you want to fly from New York to Boston or you want to fly from New York to Honolulu. It's the same 7,500 miles. And that's one of those magical things about airline miles, is that it's not related to the distance you're flying always. It's not always related to the cash price of the ticket. It's rather related to an award chart that says from this region to that region costs this number of miles. And it just so happens that the domestic United States region is very large because the US is a big country. China is also a large country. Air China is a Star Alliance airline. 7,500 miles each way would fly you anywhere in China and Air China. Do the same thing within Canada and Air Canada, the same thing in India and Air India. Any domestic flight on a Star Alliance carrier would cost 7,500 miles in economy class or 12,500 miles in business class, what United would tell you is first class. So that, I mean, that's a fantastic deal. And so when I realized it, I kind of stumbled on it and I said, wow, that can't possibly be true. But sure enough, I contacted the airline and it was true. And in the case of when I booked it initially, I had to email the airline to ask them that question. And sure enough, it turned out to be the case. So, we wrote about it and kind of broke that story. The sweetest spot that we'd been missing was the ability to use just 7,500 miles to fly to Hawaii from anywhere in the continental US on United. Now, that's pending award availability. There's some ins and outs of booking award tickets. I'm actually working on writing a guide about that right now because it is a little confusing for newcomers that don't know how to find award availability and that sort of thing. Not every seat is available for the same number of miles on every flight necessarily, but economy class is pretty easy to find within the United States. So that's actually a relatively easy one to book. And I went to Hawaii 4 times last year because of that, because it was 7,500 miles each way. I love Hawaii. I always say my brain, I'm half tropical. My brain is always on a beach somewhere. My father was born in Puerto Rico and raised in the South Bronx. And I often say my blood is tropical. So I love to be somewhere nice and warm and sunny. So I love Hawaii. It's gorgeous and terrific. And now that you can get there on such few miles, it really became an intriguing destination. A single small pile of miles from one single credit card sign-up bonus could really get you 4 people round trip or 4 times round trip yourself pretty easily. So that's.
And are you going to the same places in Hawaii over and over, or trying different islands?
No, yeah, trying different islands. So last year I went to Kauai, Maui, and Oahu. I went to Oahu a couple of times because it fit in terms of being able to stop there on the way to go to other places a couple of times. But Kauai and Maui last year, and then I would really love to be able to get to several of the other islands. I've been to the Big Island a couple times before, and didn't get there last year, but will again. Just didn't fit into the plans last year, and then I would love to get to some of the smaller islands as well. So I love each island because Hawaii is very each island is very different. I find the landscape is different, the things you can see and do are quite different. Certainly from Kauai to the Big Island or Oahu, there's quite a bit of difference in the landscape. So I just find it gorgeous and intriguing, and a beautiful place to visit. And I love tropical islands like that. Saipan, several years ago, I discovered again, kind of like Niue, where I was looking at an award chart and said, "Oh wow, well that's in this region. It's the same price as flying to these 6 other places that I've known before, but I hadn't heard of Saipan. I didn't know of it. I should have." Clearly from history, but it was an interesting place for me to learn about.
Fantastic. And in this current phase, I don't think you're actively planning many travels or perhaps only regional, but you're following all these deals. It seems like hotels have been very quiet. Some of the airlines, like the Middle East 3 airlines, have had interesting promos. Is there any one that's your favorite that if you were going to be traveling, you'd be looking hard at right now, and not valid a month or 2 ago, but somebody could take away right now, and why?
I mean, I think picking one is a little tough, so I'm going to give you 1.5. So the first thing is that most programs are offering a lot of flexibility right now, a lot more flexibility than normal. And Hilton in particular is allowing you to book stays, even advanced purchase rates through the end of August of this year. And you can cancel them up to 24 hours in advance. Even if it says it's not cancelable up to 24 hours in advance, it will be for the next year and change. So that's a pretty good opportunity to book a great deal on a stay, and then potentially be able to cancel it if plans change between now and then. That kind of flexibility is important to me. On that same note of flexibility, I don't know, you said something available now, and I didn't check because this didn't come to mind earlier, but Qatar Airways has been offering free changes for I believe it's a year, perhaps it was 2, that included a change of destination if you wanted to change your destination without changing the fare, which is something relatively unheard of in this world of booking tickets. So I'm not positive whether or not they're still running that. They were supposed to be, but I haven't checked to make sure that it's still valid. But that was the deal, that you could book a flight and then change it if you needed to another destination without paying a difference in fare, which is an amazing deal. So that's one to look up, the Qatar Airways one.
How about hotels? All that really comes to mind for me is Fairmont. I'm not thinking of anything
Buy one,
else.
get one with Fairmont. Yeah, I've been looking at Lake Louise, at the Fairmont Lake Louise, for the buy one, get one. For those not familiar, Fairmont Canada is offering a buy one night, get one free, so to speak, for stays through next June. I think it varies a little bit by property. So that's a good deal. Yeah, there aren't any other hotel promotions that stand out yet. I'm surprised, but at the same time, I think we're just easing back into travel. I would bet within the next 2 months, we're going to see some amazing hotel opportunities. There was one in Bali, the Conrad Bali had a deal going. I'm not positive if it still is, about $81 a night, I think, which the Conrad is quite a nice place for the $81 a night. But you had to book that directly through the hotel by emailing them. So that's when you might have to Google the Conrad Bali $81 deal.
Debjit's asking, any thoughts on the Etihad 50% bonus scheme?
I'm not particularly interested. So the deal there is you buy a voucher and you can get 50% more. So you buy a $1,000 voucher, you get a $1,500 voucher for $1,000 essentially for future travel. That doesn't interest me as much because I don't know what Etihad's financial stability is going to be, where they're going to be a year from now. So I'm not as interested in that.
And just closing out on the Fairmont is an obscure question. You have a Capital One card. They some of their cards transfer to Accor, which now owns Fairmont. If you're booking one of these buy one, get one free, their program is pretty simple, but it's things like vouchers for the cash. I mean, is there a play there at all to cover meals and these things, or is it a poor value?
Well, supposedly not with the Club Accor. The terms of the promo state that you can't use points, Club Accor points, towards any part of the stay if you're booking that rate. So there wouldn't be in terms of transferring to Club Accor, but some people who have a particularly old Capital One card, like I do, may be able to redeem points for Fairmont gift cards at a really favorable rate at a value of 1.4 cents per Capital One venture point. I happen to have that, so I can redeem at a much more favorable rate for gift cards and redeem 64,000 and change points for a $900 Fairmont gift card. So that's going to be my play to pay for food if I do book that. But as of right now, I have no travel at all booked for the rest of 2020 and nothing booked for 2021 yet. I'm sure that we will travel, but expecting a baby in September, probably not before the baby, and I think likely not until 2021. So I'm just not in a hurry to book yet because I know I can use my miles to book a last minute flight in January for January and be able to take advantage of that. So that's what I'll consider down the road.
Speaking of considering down the road, going to 4 is tough, but it seems like for points, going to 5 is like I'm done with the hobby. So what's the plan?
Yeah, that's I think my wife, if she were being honest, and she would be honest with you, is probably a little disappointed not to have a daughter. And so I think that there is at least a part of her that is interested in having another child. And I have tried to drill into her mind that everything is built for a family of 4. The child is going to, and when I say everything is built, I mean everything in this miles and points world is built for 4 max. Hotel rooms and award availability. Very hard to get 5 in anything. Seats, the hotel rooms that'll take 5 people. So I don't know. Is the short version of the story. There's not an easy solution there. Hyatt's family rate, actually, for people who travel with more, with 5 or 6 kids, they have a family rate where you can book a second room for half off of the cost of the first room. And the price of that varies a little bit, but it's generally a good deal. You'd have to look up Hyatt family rate in order to find it.
Well, then you could do the ultimate points thing if you add a boy and a girl of each naming them exactly the same as yourself. No junior, no anything.
That's right. Take advantage of that.
Are perfectly fungible.
Yeah, that's we'll see. We'll see how that goes. So as of right now, one day at a time, one child at a time. We'll see how things go when we expand the family. It was a big adjustment, of course, going from no kids. My wife and I had been together already for 12-ish years by the time we had our sons. So it was already a big adjustment, one we were ready for and very much excited for when we had our son, and we're very excited to add another addition. But I'm sure it's going to be a lot different. as it was when our son was born. So it's an exciting time, exciting change, and it just turned out to be a fortunate time for us in terms of a time to be stuck at home. This was probably it for us in terms of the convenience of being stuck at home right now, because right now the big travel would have been more challenging anyway. We had kind of intended to take 2020 slowly and not travel as much as we had in 2019 and in previous years. Didn't anticipate staying at home for 3 straight months here, but at the same time, we'll stay at home as long as we have to. We're very fortunate to live in a very rural area where we're surrounded by trees. You might have heard a chicken or two at some point during this. I think I heard the chicken outside. So we live in the woods, really. You can't see other houses from where we are. So social distancing is kind of a way of life for us already. And, we'll stay at home as long as we need to before we're ready to get back out there again.
Thank you for joining us today, Nick.
Thank you. It was great to be here. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.